I'm a pediatric oncologist by training, and as I came out of my training, I said, well, I have to go then to the next frontier. And one frontier that stands out in the cancer world are these malignant brain tumors. Through the course of this research and my work with very talented and wonderful collaborators, that when I'm gray and sitting on a rocking chair, that the outcome for patients with glioblastoma would be very, very different.
Mike and I trained together up in Seattle. We overlapped with our sense of interest and with our desire to see really new therapies being developed for kids, essentially to give a new option, and that is immune-based therapies, and particularly to develop T-cell-based therapies.
I see this as a battle that it's going to take time to learn how to harness the power of the immune system through this genetic manipulation, so we can attack gliomas, and that we can do it in a way in which the normal brain is left unharmed.
The only way to really know if it's going to work is when you try it in a person, in a human being. To be able to do that, you have to be able to essentially satisfy two principles. The first is you have to be convinced that it might work for that person. And the second is you have to also take on the responsibility to do the least harm to that individual as a result of going through this experimental treatment.
We're in a sense at a point where we're in the very first space missions, if you will. This is the first time in medical history that an engineered T-cell is going to be introduced into the brain to help treat glioblastoma. Kathy was almost the very first patient to be like an astronaut going into orbit for the first time. She's a patient that immediately grabs you by the heartstrings, that you can really fall in love with and care about. She's 30. She has a terrible form of cancer that's very aggressive. She has 2 young children that she's raising, and a loving husband, and a family that has surrounded her and is rallying for her. And she's a real fighter. Since her operation about 2.5 weeks ago, the tumor's doubled in size. And because of that, over the last 24 to 48 hours, her neurologic status has deteriorated quite dramatically, such that this morning her husband had difficulty waking her up, and when she did wake up, she was very confused and actually in quite a lot of danger of having a very critical event occur in her brain when the pressure increases. This was the moment of truth for her, because this change in her status makes it impossible for us to move forward and give her her T-cells.
The patients who come on the trial have to be sick enough such that they qualify for these novel experimental therapeutics. In other words, they really need to be dying. They need to have a disease, a malignancy in this case, where it's likely that malignancy will take their life. But on the other hand, they can't be so sick that there isn't a window of opportunity to intervene. They can't be so sick that they would die before, for instance, the T-cells are available for them.
The protocol is very structured and says we cannot treat Kathy now because of what she's experienced today. I feel disappointed from the perspective of everything that went into this to have our patient ready for treatment, but more so it's very, very saddening to, on a personal level, for Kathy to pull that rug from under her feet. She knows that this was perhaps her only hope for beating this disease, and her husband knows that, and her children may know that as well. And so it's a tragic event in many ways.
And there's some things that are just out of our control as physicians. The other fear is that there is part of me that will reach a point where I can't do this job anymore. I worry that there'll be an interaction with a family, a moment that will say, you've seen enough. And then that lack of, it almost would be a lack of concern. I worry that I'll have a lack of concern. I'll have put myself in the situation so many times that I've built too big a wall, and then the patient can't get through and I can't do my job. The other way is that the wall will never be strong enough, and that I'll get too emotionally involved with each of these kids' lives, and it'll take too much out of me, and I won't want to do the job anymore.
The way I see it is I have to persevere, that the challenges that we're going to face, the potential disappointments like this morning that we're going to see cannot take away our commitment and drive to see this technology and these new forms of treatment through to the end point of curing patients.
What led me here was the ability to do something new and dramatic and to make a difference. There's a close relationship between the scientist in the laboratory and, if you will, the physician-scientist taking care of the patient. And what we rely on is a dialogue between the physicians and the basic scientists to identify problems, help understand those problems, and develop new therapies. You know, as an oncologist, if you ever doubt why you do this work, coming to a transplant reunion will certainly set you straight for the year. A bone marrow transplant is the most intensive cancer therapy that there is, and it is sometimes the most dramatic because we're usually taking care of patients who have a fatal disease, and in the absence of a transplant, they would die of that disease. So every success is the ultimate success.
So how did all this begin? It began with a single life 27 years ago that was saved, and here we are thousands of lives later. And what ties all of you and us together in a single word is obvious. It's hope.
I think about these people throughout the year, and I see them individually in clinic, and it's always wonderful to see somebody doing well, and you're always reassured with each appointment that goes by, each year that goes by, that they're okay, and they're out in the world doing what healthy people are supposed to do. At a reunion where you're seeing thousands of them all together at one time, and you look out at that tent that's overflowing with people, recognizing that in the absence of what this center and this program did, the tent would be empty, is overwhelming.
I'd like to introduce you to your donor, Technical Sergeant Daniel McDonald.
I came with my family today to meet Daniel and celebrate the joy of life. You know, that's what this celebration's about. Celebration of life.
My mother passed away of cancer. She passed away at 48 years old. She was rather young. And I think in the back of my mind, I saw maybe the possibility of completing her life. We're all brought into this earth supposedly for a purpose, and maybe this was her purpose.
At our reunion today, we have patients who are as young as under a year, but we have patients who will have celebrated their 80th birthday. And to be able to have something to offer every generation, a grandchild and their grandparent, has been a goal of ours for a long time, and we're seeing that happen right now. It's for the people who we weren't successful that is the inspiration to work harder and to make change. And in fact, every patient who is here for the reunion is probably here because of somebody who didn't make it before them, that we learned and said, you know, that wasn't good enough, we got to do this better. I think they are as much a part of this event as the patients who survived. It's a partnership between a philosophy, scientists, and physicians, and patients. There's no result in cancer we have right now, including transplant, that we can't improve upon and shouldn't improve upon it. What we did yesterday for somebody isn't good enough today. It won't be good enough tomorrow for who's going to come to us.